Babylon 5 is a bit of an unfairly maligned series. It sits in a pack of other sci-fi shows, and it never really got the credit it deserved. I think that's a pity because it was actually written to be a proper work, a proper serious literary thing. It was a space opera, and it had loads of cool stuff going on. And so I think it does really deserve a proper look at, a proper chance to be analysed and thought about. I think the place that I want to start thinking about Babylon 5 is looking at the Earth Alliance, the humans of that universe, and contrasting with Star Trek and with 40K and with various other human governments going forward. The problem with that, of course, is that the Earth Alliance's government is really boring. For most of the time, they are just a really boring presidential republic. The various nations and supranations and future nations of Earth come together. They make an Earth Alliance that's kind of the US, but in space. And then its colonies and whatever get added as members as they go. So far, so US. So we're not going to talk about that because that's really boring. What we're going to talk about is how the Earth went fascist. So for those who know Babylon 5's canon, obviously Earth goes fascist when President Clark assassinates President Santiago, takes over as effectively dictator of Earth. The thing is, that's not really when Earth went fascist. Earth went fascist way before that. This is just a coup, and these things happen. And of course, it's quite possible to replace one fascist with another fascist. And I kind of think that's what happened. I think that Santiago's assassination was intra-party fighting, and it had very little to do with the broader ideological development of Earth. I think that in a very sneaky way, the Earth Alliance that we see in the show, and of course we always see it from the other side of the coin, we see it from Sheridan's side of the coin, and from Sinclair's side of the coin, and from the perspective of people who live amongst aliens and don't live amongst humans. So they have a certain view of the Earth Alliance, that it was whatever they left it when they came to work on Babylon 5. But I think if you look at it from the perspective of the individual citizens of the Earth Alliance, I think the Earth Alliance was, if not truly fascist, it was certainly a strong imperialist power before any of the events of the show. And I think that it's implied that this fascistic form of development is a part of a natural cycle for every race, every civilization, that it has to go through and grow through and eventually learn not to do. All right, so stick with me, here we go. So there's three things that I would contend create the Earth Alliance as a I guess you'd say sort of pre-fascist state. I don't want to say fascist about everything in the way that Noam Chomsky does, because that's garbage and it doesn't really mean anything at that point. But I think that the important factors are there, and they're there much earlier than we see in the show, okay? And the three factors there are the arrival of telepaths in human society, or should I say the arrival of them as a confirmed existing thing. Secondary, the Dilgar War, and thirdly, the Earth-Minbari War. And I would contend that after that, that's when the Earth is set up as a proto-fascist state. It still has democracy, but you can be a democratic fascist. There's no reason why you can't be, and you don't have to be a totalitarian, authoritarian government either. I mean, that's where Noam Chomsky gets the idea that the present-day US is a fascist state. That's not strictly true, but you can see what he's saying, and you can see more of that in the Earth Alliance. Okay, so the arrival of telepaths is a big deal, and it's perhaps the most important development in human history, or, sort of jointly along with interstellar travel and first contact with other species. Because as soon as telepaths arrive, oh good lord, there's going to be a lot of upheaval in your society at that point. There's no way that there can't be. You could go one way and just try and wipe out telepaths, or you could try to control and regulate telepaths, but to do that, you have to be, just strict. You have to be really harsh with the telepaths involved. You can't regulate them any other way. Or you have to embrace them and basically try to breed your whole society better. So eugenics. None of these are great, but these are the only options you have available. Because the big deal about telepaths is that all forms of government run on secrets. And it's true for business and it's true for everything, like the ability to make a plan and not have the other guy know about it is central to any aspect of civilization that's competitive. And the arrival of telepaths breaks that instantly. Now, you could become a really collectivist society and say, oh, we actually don't care about keeping secrets from each other anymore. All a bit Brave New Worldy, all a bit, Big Brothery. The problem with that is, though, that there's other people than yourselves out there. Humanity knows there are alien races and that the alien races also have telepaths, and you need to be able to make plans and do things in this galaxy that other aliens exist in. You can't control them. And as long as the other guy has a telepath, you need a telepath too. So that means that it's not really feasible to just get rid of telepaths from your society. But what do you do with them? And of course, that naturally leads you to you have to regulate them. And who's going to regulate them? Well, it's going to be the state. And the state's going to have a monopoly over the use of telepathic power. Which sounds like a great idea until you remember that the government itself has a great deal of uses for secrets, for finding out things that it is not supposed to know about. It makes the state really, really powerful. But there's basically no choice here. As long as telepaths exist, they're going to have to be, to some degree, placed under state control. And the only alternative to that, of course, is to completely restructure society. And that's not acceptable either. That's a really bad idea, to just definitively say, nah, our whole society is not going to work on the basis of, competitive enterprise anymore. That's not going to work. So you're left with the only solutions of kill them all or bring them on the inside of the government. But that's too much power for the government to have either way, so that's not great. And of course, once they're there, the ability to read people's minds is super powerful and super dangerous. And it's not the kind of power that you want the state to have. But what are you going to do? We've got these telepaths, and we can either use them or we can kill them. We got to do one, so we're going to use them, because obviously we are, because the state would never give up anything as useful as a telepath. So I think that this sets up the Earth Alliance to be at least leaning in a fascistic direction, because it's just so easy to have a secret police force when they can read your mind. And the rest of humanity doesn't seem to have a problem with that. Or in theory, Psychor is not supposed to just go around reading people's minds, but the general public know that Psychor exists. They know that the Psychops exist, and they're generally in support of it. They find the Psychor to be sinister, and that's not being helped out by their weird black outfits, but they accept that this is kind of how it has to be. And I agree with that. I think that it does have to be like that as soon as telepathy is a real thing and a real big deal, and it is a big deal in this universe. All of the meta-narrative of how humanity is going to ascend and outgrow themselves is all down to telepaths. There's no other way to do that, right? If we get rid of telepaths now, then humanity doesn't really have a future. But they are weird and sinister. And of course, once they exist, and they become slowly more political, because obviously they become political because everyone becomes political. We sort of kid ourselves that institutions like the CIA or the FBI or whoever, we kid ourselves that these aren't political, but of course they're political. It comes down to budget, it comes down to policy, and even when everyone has good intentions, the CIA wants to defend the homeland as best it can for its own sense of what defending the homeland means. They want policies that let them do that. They don't want policies that go against that. And that's political, but it's not political in a way that is easy to pull apart. But that's genuinely what's going on. And Psychor does the same thing, right? They get in bed with Clark, Vice President Clark, soon to become President Clark. Although it's not clear, and we never find out, it seems like Psychor picked Clark to be their guy, rather than the other way around. But in truth, it doesn't really matter. The two are working together. And one of the things that they both want is to increase the power of Psy-Corps and increase its use as an intelligence gathering arm. But I think that was inevitable. I think that at some point someone was going to say, oh, this is a great idea. And then that would just be normal. Anyway, so telepaths put you on the road to forming the Gestapo. Fair enough. We would hope that we would be morally courageous enough to say, no, we're not just going to read people's minds and kill them if they're communists. But it would always be tempting to do so, and sometimes it's just expedient. We know that the other races do the same kind of stuff as well. It's not that shocking that humans point in that direction. And as I say, once telepaths do fundamentally exist, you're on a trajectory that takes you towards a more muscularly authoritarian form of state. So that is the Psy-Corps part of it. The other two parts, the Dilgar War and the Earth Minbari War, are both things that show us that the Earth Alliance is a militaristic, imperialistic power that is sort of trying to claim that it's not, but it so is, and they're not kidding anyone, right? Earth gets involved in the Dilgar War to prove that they can. And that's garbage. Like, that's a terrible reason to get involved in a war. But that's why they did, and the people of the Earth Alliance were okay with that. It was just fine. Well, the League of Non-Aligned Worlds are having a rough time of it, so we're just going to jump in and do our thing. Earth's never fought an interstellar war before. They have no idea what they're doing. But they're going to come do it, and they did, and they won it, and they possibly genocided the Dilgar. That's not hugely important, but that's kind of what did happen. And again, the people of Earth were okay with it. And that's fine, because the Dilgar were really unsavory people. But this was a war fought for bad reasons. And people were okay with it. And then, over the next 10 years, Earth is in the ascendant. They've used their military might, they've won a war, they've started building colonies, they've become, if not a great power, they've certainly become a stronger power. And the people are happy about it. Like any growing, thriving empire, there's still problems in the Earth Alliance. But all of this great interstellar, if not golden age, certainly a gilded age, is great. Everyone's making money. All of the problems, there's issues with independence from Mars. There's these various causes that are going on. But by and large, things are going well. And people are really happy with that. And they've seen that this has come over the military might of Earth, even though Earth knows that they're not as advanced as pretty much anyone else. But they can use their might in a positive way, or what appears to them to be a positive way. And they cheer it on, they love it. Again, this is very concerningly, if not pre-fascist, it's proper pre-World War I Germany stuff. This is Earth that wants to fight and squabble and struggle and kind of has this idea that struggle is going to be a good thing for them, that they can come out on top. That does not pan out, as it turns out. There's a war with Minbari, and that sucks. This is a real problem for Earth. It's not hugely important how Earth ends up in the war with Minbar. They do, and they are not prepared for this. The Minbari are vastly more advanced, vastly more experienced. They kick the crap out of the Earth Alliance. At the very end of it, they don't see it through and actually wipe the Earth Alliance out. And this has two twin effects, right? So as far as the citizens of Earth are concerned, the EA military made a valiant last stand in orbit over Earth, and they won a Pyrrhic victory, and both sides agreed to just cut their losses and back off. And if you're a citizen of the Earth Alliance, you kind of feel, well, it was rough, but we got there by the strength of our military and our leadership and whatever. We can go up against the Minbari are kind of the greatest power in the galaxy, absent Vorlons and Shadows, but of the races that are actually around, the Minbari are top of the pyramid. And the Earth Alliance beat them, and maybe didn't conquer them, but they won. And that's what it looks like if you're a citizen. If you're on the inside of the government, though, you know exactly how fragile you are as the Earth Alliance. You know that you've bitten off more than you can chew, and you are now desperately trying to obtain weaponry and science and systems and all kinds of crap. you need it right now, because you never know when the Minbari are going to come back and give you another going over. And so we combine all of these elements together, right? We're looking at telepaths creating the environment for secret policing and strong authoritarian central government. We add to that the sort of the bellicose nature that comes from winning the Dilgar War, and then we finally have this twin victory and defeat from the Minbari War. Those in government are desperately pursuing more and better weaponry, and those in the public think Earth is awesome, Earth has won before, and we're going to keep on winning. And I think that this is a picture of a semi-fascist society. We don't get to see anything of what is really going on behind the scenes with Santiago and Clark, but it seems quite likely that while Santiago was more moderate, that Clark's political aims and his agenda didn't change much when he assassinated his boss and took it over. It seems like this has always been Clark's goal. He didn't just stand up and one day decide to be Space Hitler. No, he has this agenda, and he's made friends with Psychor, and he's made some deals with the Shadows. He's not being run by the Shadows, but he's made deals with them, and he's pushing this agenda of advanced technology, of advanced systems and understanding, and he's going to take that as far as he can go with it. And in fact, when we think about it from that position, okay, maybe Clark couldn't have gotten enough voters by himself just to push that agenda forward in a legitimate way, but he 100% was getting some votes. There's a reason that he's vice president to Santiago, and maybe he is the more hardline fringe of his own party, sure, but that hardline fringe was a significant enough minority that he was put on the ticket. There's plenty of people on Earth who think that Clark has the right idea about aliens. He thinks that, that aliens are an absolute danger, that Earth must be protected, and God help us, we are going to defend this planet and our empire, and ideally we're going to grow it, and we're going to show Johnny Alien who's boss. Again, this isn't the whole of the Earth Alliance, but it's enough of the Earth Alliance, and it's enough of the Earth Alliance that even a more moderate position, embodied by Santiago, is still one that thinks fighting wars against aliens is all right. Santiago is not the dove, he's not a peacenik at all. And in fact, what we see with Clark once he does murder Santiago is that all of the really monstrous stuff that he does is all connected to his power struggle to try and take over from Santiago. It's all about his actions to try and shut up the Senate and to try and quell the uprisings in the colonies. But his agenda of lots of weapons, lots of technology is fine. I don't think that the people of Earth would have had any problems with that. And in fact, I think that, give or take, given what's happening in the rest of the galaxy, I think he could have just won it democratically. But that's not strictly important. But you can see that this tendency towards we're going to be a big, strong military power is pretty clearly there in the Earth Alliance. What's quite telling is that when we see Clark's policies in action, when we see the arrival of Night Watch, and we see this nice interplay where the good people end up being members of an organization they don't like because they sort of feel like they have to, and this is where the Clark regime is becoming truly fascist. But the thing is that there's a grain of truth to the Night Watch idea, right? That there are aliens who are trying to, if not conquer Earth, but they're certainly trying to manipulate Earth. And both the Vorlons and the Shadows are trying to do that. So there is something to be worried about. The Night Watch is a bad way to try and tackle it, and it's just a sort of a feel-good nonsense, and it gives you an opportunity to, snitch and police and do your totalitarian stuff. But fundamentally, it's not wrong. What's interesting here as well is that we never even have a notion that Clark has an agenda except the face value one. He does seem to want to be a dictator of humanity, fair play. He does seem to want to be the dictator of humanity, but he seems to want to do that for the reasons that he says. He seems to want to control Earth so that he can better defend it. He wants to be a dictator in the Roman sense. He doesn't want to be a big brother figure. He doesn't have a fetish for control and domination, as far as we know. He just seems to want to do this stuff, and he has a pretty clear idea that if you're going to do it in a democratic way, well, that's not going to be good enough. We need more than just what the Senate will vote for us in order to build up Earth and make it a proper power. What I really like about this is that it does the great sci-fi thing of putting a government or a type of government that we know and throws science fiction wibbliness at it and just kind of sees how it will react. Because the way that it does react is really understandable in a way. If you're a citizen of Earth, and remember, this is happening on a really compressed timeline. So, the Dilgar War is happening, 2230, and the Babylon Project is up and running in 2257. So it's a lifetime. You could have been a young man, a young person, during the Dilgar War. You could have seen that Earth's might is powerful and useful, and has created something of a golden age, and that, through your teens and 20s and 30s, you've seen all of this going on. You've seen that a powerful Earth is a really good thing, and it's a force for good, actually, right? Because the Dilgar are terrible. They're proper awful. So beating them is a good thing. You get into this war with Minbari, and that war is mental. No one really understands why that started. It appears, if you're a citizen of the Earth Alliance, that the Minbari just went nuts. The misunderstanding part of it's not important at all, because they kind of did go nuts, all right? They kind of did. So obviously these aliens are really dangerous, and Earth just about survived them, and you've seen this all in your lifetime, and you have this sense of, goddamn, we need a powerful Earth military. We can't have another war that comes so close to being lost. And it follows on from there with the character of the Earth government. And I think that's the important thing. It's not about Clark and Santiago, it's about who the hell was Santiago. Because he was clearly on the same political spectrum as Clark. He was clearly, if not a militarist, but certainly an expansionist. And all of the advanced weapons programs that we see during the Clark regime, they didn't just spring up overnight. Earth was doing this stuff way before Clark assassinates Santiago. This is just what Earth looks like. They've seen that it's a hostile galaxy, and they voted for a strong military, strong borders, weapons development, and, all of the big sticks that implies. And even when they are still a notionally democratic people, we know that other bits of the Senate were just as bad. When Sheridan shows up and theoretically liberates Earth, and the woman who decides to take over from Clark says, yeah, you're really inconvenient, Sheridan. We can't have you and your alien mates. All right, we can't have you and your treason. You need to get out, because that's just not what the Earth Alliance needs to see right now. And it fits with the timeline. It fits with the events that we see. It's hard to think that we would do anything different under the same circumstances, because our civilizations have, other than the telepaths, kind of been through the same stuff. We've lived through that age of expansion and empire, and Babylon 5 is taking us back there, where we can have colonies and wars and we can do stuff, and it's not against other humans, because, we have this strong taboo against ethnic hatred of other humans. All right, fair enough. Happy to accept that should remain taboo. But against aliens, who are, firstly, they're so different. They're not just people from a different country, a different place. No. Aliens are something different. And on top of that, there are alien telepaths in the world. There's hyperspace. There's super ancient alien things out there to be found. It's really big. It's really dangerous. It's really bad. Dreadful things happen in space. And so Earth moves towards this much more authoritarian, sinister mindset, and not in a bad way, really. I know that sounds ridiculous, but not in a bad way. It's not that the Earthicans are bad people or have bad values or whatever. All that they want is to just have their civilization continue to grow, to have its existing structures and institutions respected. But the galaxy is a really dangerous place, and the only way that you're going to make that happen is by having perhaps not your whole civilization, but like a big chunk of your civilization has to be dedicated to preserving what you've got. Because how can you not? Because all of the good things are predicated on your trade, on your control of the seas and the shipping. And in fact, the reason why people aren't attacking you is because they know you could beat them. And we see that the Earth Alliance is, hitting a lot of these same things. They have that desire for the majesty and glory of the imperial era, of the pre-World War I era, the military strength around it. And then that's wrapped up in a more authoritarian bundle with stricter social controls, with a fear of the alien and the outsider, with the need to cede individual liberty to the state so the state can protect you from worse things on the outside. Again, in a fascist sense, that's more complex, but that's what they would argue is happening. And we think, what else can we say to this kind of government? Like any good space empire, the Earth Alliance doesn't have an economic system beyond being a free market capitalist undertaking. But I don't even think that that's really relevant in this context, because the overarching construction of the Earth Alliance state, in that one that is more and more powerful, with the state doing more and more specific stuff, and it's all defense related, it's not economic related, that the state is acquiring power and acquiring strength, and it's telling you that it's for your good, that the state needs this power so that it can make your society continue to succeed. Like, I think that this taken together is a picture of a fascist or a pre-fascist society. Like, it was always going to be possible that at the next crisis, Earth was going to have a dictator, and it was going to have a good run of proper fascist governance. And in fact, if there's a different timeline and things go a bit differently, I think that the Shadow Vorlon War would have been that crisis. Now, because there's Sheridan and Delenn, and there's a whole big deal with the last Vorlon Shadow War. But if it had just been another one of their great cyclical wars, then Earth would have had, I won't say no choice, but it would have just done what almost all of the other spacefaring races did and picked a side. And in picking that side, and it would almost certainly have been the Shadows, in picking that side, they would have become a dictatorial undertaking more like the Centauri. I mean, if I had to guess, I would say that they would end up being, more like that 19th century Britain, right? With an absolute ruler, but also with a parliament, and also with some colonial governors and what have you. I think it wouldn't have looked like a hard German fascist undertaking. But I do think that big crisis, where it seemed like Earth would be overrun and destroyed, I think the people of Earth would have simply said, yes, this is a big enough crisis, bring on the dictator. We need it right now. We need the stern spank of daddy government. And perhaps that's the big message that we get from the Earth Alliance, is not that fascism per se is good or bad, and that's kind of one of the messages that we get from the series, right, is that there isn't really a good or a bad pole. There's a golden mean of good that sits between order and chaos. And I think that's true for the Earth Alliance and their sort of fascistic tendencies as well, is that when we look at it and we sort of understand why they've made the choices and the decisions that they have, and we think, oh, they've clearly gone too far towards order or chaos, depending on how you argue it, because the Shadows are theoretically chaos, but they're becoming more fascistic and more controlled, so it's hard to say. But Earth has gone too far in one direction. It's stumbled away from the golden mean, but it's done so because it didn't have another choice. And in fact, it seemed that the only way to continue the civilization was to stray away and say, well, we're making our choice this way, and that's a dictatorship, and that's not great, but it is what it is, and if that's what you've got to do to survive, well, this isn't a galaxy where you can get by on high-minded principles. You need a big stick, and you need an ancient race as your benefactors. You need it. Maybe this takes us into a deeper sense of whether really, when we're talking about, dictatorship versus democracy versus whatever, I think what we can see in Babylon 5 is that sometimes you need to be a more collectivist undertaking. Sometimes you need to just work as one. And if you're going to die, you have no choice. And there is no moral judgment in choosing to survive if that's the only option. The crisis that pushes you towards being a dictatorship, if that's what it takes to survive, that's what it takes to survive. The crisis would have pushed Earth to become much more collectivist, and I think that's the type of society that Psychor wants, because it wants to breed telepaths. And while they're really sinister and kind of evil, they actually have the right idea that humanity needs to become more telepathically active if they're going to advance as a species. And that, well, in times of crisis, you just don't have a choice. And that's okay in a grander scheme of things, because as things get bad, you need to have this strong iron fist of power centralized, and then as that threat wanes, you can become more free and more liberal and more individualistic, but then that's going to cause the next crisis to occur, because individualism is this much more chaotic approach to life. And that sort of plays into Babylon 5's overarching narrative of grand cycles of order and chaos, and trying to find a path through them, and that really the only thing that's important is making your own decisions instead of having them made for you. What we're being told here is that our own civilizations today could become fascistic almost overnight, which they genuinely could, and that's something that we do need to remember. But they become fascistic, or what have you, totalitarian in some way, but they become that way for a reason. And it's easy to say, oh, it was just Clark and his murderous plot to overtake Santiago. Nah, that's not true at all. And in fact, that was the last step on a huge ladder that led up to that point. And while Earth might not have become truly fascistic had Clark not staged his assassination, but they would only have ever been one step away from the crisis that pushes Earth out of being an individualist race for a while. Just like our societies, if we have that choice to win or lose and stand and fight and die and whatever, and we take the choice that, well, we're going to have to be less free to survive, then that's what it is. That's the choice that we made, and we did it for ourselves, and we maybe even did it in the knowledge that this was bad, but it was necessary. And I don't want to say that I won't say genocidal regime, but a militaristic, totalitarian regime. I don't want to say that that was necessary, but that was a response to a specific development for humanity. And the only way for humanity to get away from it, being defeated, doesn't change it. It doesn't change what's in the minds of the people who live in the Earth Alliance. The only thing that can change the Earth Alliance is to go through the cycle again, to come out the other end as a no longer fascist society, having realized that they don't need to keep doing this anymore. And just like the grand cycles that are in the rest of Babylon 5, this order and chaos, individual, collective stuff is just going on and on and on all the time. And what we're being shown here is that, yeah, these things kind of do need to run their course, that the Earth Alliance needs to go through this life cycle of growth and expansion, and then defeat and regrowth and soft power and hard power, and it needs to figure it out for itself and walk its own path. And that's really what it comes down to. The problem in Babylon 5, it's nothing to do with making mistakes and having bad things happen, having bad governments and dictators and whatever. As long as you're making those mistakes yourself, or your society is making them themselves, and you're not just being put on a path by the invisible ancient races, that's the thing to strive for, is to be learning and making mistakes yourselves. And on a grand scale, of course we don't like the dictatorship, but the only way to understand why our society can't run like that is to go through it and develop and move beyond it and become a more liberal state, not by having it forced on you, because that doesn't work. Look at Iraq and Afghanistan and a million other places. You can't just enforce it. It has to run back through the cycle and have Earth re-arise like a phoenix and be reborn as a liberal state again, once we've perhaps come out the other side of the question of telepaths and what we're going to do with them, and maybe integrate them into society. We have to answer these questions, and perhaps it does take a more central, perhaps even more brutal form of government to answer that question one way or another. No one wants to have to be the bad guy to say, well, actually, yeah, we are going to get a bit weird and eugenicist with the telepath. It's like, well, that is something that's going to have to happen. Someone's going to have to make a decision, and it's going to end up being the bad guy. It's going to end up being the dictator who says, yep, we're doing this, off we go. All right, well, this is just some musings off the top of my head about the sort of future fascism that we see in Babylon 5's Earth Alliance. It contrasts reasonably nicely with the United Federation of Planets from Star Trek, who has a much more optimistic view of human nature than the Earth Alliance does. So maybe go and check that video out. We're going to be back sometime next week. We're going to start talking about Space Marines and about the Imperium of Man and its military forces. So check back in for that. All right, so peace out.